Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Making Action Happen. I'm Sarah Blackhurst.
And I'm Brian McCain.
This is so exciting. We have Adam Frisch back in the studio with us today. This is his first really in-depth interview that he's given after perpetrating maybe the biggest upset. The biggest upset in the 2022 midterm elections, where right now, as we speak, they're still doing an automatic recount on your race against Lauren Boebert. So thanks for coming back and talking to us.
It's great to be back in Pueblo.
I've been excited to talk to you about this ever since that happened. We were watching it so closely.
Yep.
Literally the text and the refreshing and all of that happened. So I know how we were feeling on this side of it. Can you give us just a little bit of insight, that last week and then the day of, and then the week after? What was happening?
Thanks. It's great to be back in Pueblo. Great to be back behind the Action 22 mic. No, it's been a wild couple weeks, that's for sure. Leading up to Election Day, I really felt just in my heart and bones and talking to people that we were pretty much statistically tied. And this is a race that a lot of people had written off before I even got involved. This 538 and Cook Political Report, a couple of very well-known East Coast firms that follow a lot of this stuff, had this under no chance, 2% chance of winning. And everything I set out a year ago that there was a chance to focus on, more people want people playing between the 240-yard lines, as Don Coram says.
Yep. And
I talk about people want the circus to stop on both sides. So got on this race. We started down 7 points. We were down 2 points. Chris Keating out of Telluride was our pollster, and he was spot on during this whole thing. And I just felt like on Election Day that, I would just say this, I was not surprised when we were up by a couple points on election night. It was obviously an invigorating thing. It shocked the country without a doubt. I mean, it's still the only race out of the 435 races that hasn't been called. We're down by 500 and some votes. I just don't think there's any chance for us to catch up to those. I'm getting updates. The elections in Colorado are very, very well run. And, I heard from Montezuma County that I think Boebert lost 1 vote and I was equal, and another vote, we each lost 1 vote. So it just, unless somebody can find 500 more counties in the state of Colorado, right. I'm pretty sure she's going to go back to office. But, so we had a huge moral victory for sure, but it was invigorating to be up on election night. I knew that we were probably going to be losing some of that lead or more of that lead, just because Republicans, for some reason, I don't know why, decided to vote at the end. I mean, we were probably one snowstorm away from winning. You could have said, and I want as many people voting as possible, I would say, but people got very, very excited. We were up in Aspen, up in the mountains, and I know it got very, very quiet at Boebert's office. I think they thought that they were going to win by 10 points, truly. Mm-hmm. But I knew that we had a really good chance, and I knew we ran a really good campaign, and I knew we connected with a lot of people. It was just a matter of could we hold on to those votes. And, that was on Tuesday night. Sunday morning, I got on a plane to D.C. with my wife, Katie, my son, Felix, both whom were very involved in the campaign. And we went out to the first week of this new member orientation, where there were probably 80 or 90 new members of the House, of which about 15 of us were there under not completely clear victory or not. And so there were
How many were there?
There's probably 15 or 20 people that, this is 5 days after the election.
Right.
Yeah.
And it happens every term. There's a certain amount of Republicans there. There's a certain amount of Democrats there that you show up there not knowing, you have that you're in the mix. And you have a good chance of winning or you have a good chance of not. So as I joked with people, I try to sit on the edge of the group photos in case I had to be cut out. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to be cut out of those photos. But you really felt the weight of the job. And so for those who remember, Tuesday was the election, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all these ballots were coming in and we were slowly losing by a little bit. And then Colorado pretty much stopped for about 5 days to decide to kind of just refresh, give the county clerks a break, and come back in. And at the start of that 5-day break, we were down about 1,100 votes. And then they started counting some more, and then we went from 1,100 down to 500 down. or 550 down. And that's kind of where we've been sitting ever since. And so at the end of the new member orientation, which was very cool. I mean, you started off the morning with everybody, Republicans and Democrats, in one room in an auditorium, kind of being told how to build up an office, how to staff people, how to, write a bill, a little bit of some other stuff. And you get a wide variety of people that have experiences, either people that have been state legislatures for 20 years and some people that just kind of, there's this Marie woman, Democrat, who ran in rural Washington. She and her husband were auto mechanics. They had a young baby. They had to bring the baby into the mechanic shop because they couldn't afford. And so you have a wide variety of experience of people that are there. But that Friday afternoon when they were done counting all the votes, Friday morning, that is when I made a concession speech, and it upset a lot of people on the left because they just wanted to fight, and I appreciate where they were coming from, but we were getting a lot of pressure to raise a bunch of money, and I knew that if we were going to really battle it on, there'd be a lot of money raised, and it wouldn't be for nothing because, as everyone who follows Colorado election rules know, that if the votes changed by more than 10 or 15 votes, it wasn't going to do anything. And I would say this, it's a little tricky to say this. A concession was very sincere. It's not a legally binding comment that you make. It's just a tradition that I think is really important in the United States political system. When you know you're losing or don't really have any chance of coming back, you throw up the white flag, and that's kind of what we did. I think it's important for the recount to happen. Wasn't up to our campaign. It wasn't up to Boebert's campaign to stop it. It wasn't up to the Secretary of State's office to stop it either. When the Colorado voters decided that when it gets to be 0.5% or closer of the winning person's vote, you do an automatic recount, and that gets covered by the people and the taxpayers. And there seems to be a lot of drama flying around on all sides, but I've tried to be pretty zen through the whole thing, and if stressing would change votes, I would be a very, very good stressor, but stressing doesn't change votes, so we're just letting this whole thing play out. I believe in the 12th or the 13th, the Secretary of State will certify those votes, and I'd be shocked if Lauren Boebert is not certified the winner.
Yeah, I think looking back on it as well, and I've heard from multiple people that don't like Representative Boebert, this was kind of a check on her. She went into this race, again, expecting, people said, she's going to win by 20 points. It's going to be a landslide, and it wasn't. But this kind of shows that she's vulnerable now. And with that, I think that I would hope that somebody that was in her position would take a long, hard look at the district and actually less running around, not in Colorado doing stuff, and maybe a little more Colorado focused after this.
No, I mean, I think if we take a step back and look at the national level, I made a couple bets when I looked at this race last October, November, December, which was I thought Trumpism, extremism was starting to wane. And I think no matter how you look at it, what happened last election result is extremism took a big hit on the head. I think, I've said the Democrats who run extremes have been losing. The Republican extremists have been winning. I do believe the incentive has changed a little bit on the Republican side, that to run as an extremist is not the best way to win. There's no doubt some Republicans lost some Senate seats because they didn't run qualified good candidates. And you hear this on the right and you hear this on the left as well. And so, for someone who is a centrist, you want to see people, again, playing in those 240-yard lines, which is really, really important. And so I'm hoping that is going to continue regardless of the outcomes on the national side. As it goes to Western and Southern Colorado, it's no secret of our playbook. The number one thing couple of things that resonated a lot. One is, and I said, for myself, if there was a Get Stuff Done party, I'd be in that party. And I've said that for 20 years. That resonated with a lot of people, including those that were wearing the MAGA hats and that were pretty pro-Trumpy. People want the circus to stop. I think ranchers and farmers are pragmatic, if not anything. And, she has some strengths. Being pragmatic is not one of them. And she obviously didn't I don't think she's taken the job very seriously. We pointed that out all the time. And I don't think she took her responsibilities of looking after her constituents very seriously. And a lot of other people agreed. I mean, the district is only 25% D, and we got 49.8 or 49.9% of the vote. So basically half of our votes came from non-Ds, and I knew that we could have that chance to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, if one of the best scenarios that comes out of this is the current representative starts to take the job more seriously and focusing on her constituents more and less on herself, I'll take some credit for that, and I think that's a good thing. And I just think that representatives need to focus on this job. And she was not focused on this job. She was focused on herself. Whether she's going to reset or not, or how much she's going to reset, well, that will have to be seen.
This also shows the importance of voting for people that say, oh, my vote doesn't count. You always go to the local election where you have a county commissioner that wins by 1, or 2 or 3 or whatever. This was a congressional election that close. I mean, that's closer than winning or losing by 1 vote in Pueblo County. That's like a fraction of a percentage point.
We had 327,000 votes cast, and we lost. We're going to probably very well likely lose by 500 or 550 votes. And when you look at the voter rolls who didn't show up, it's disappointing. I don't get mad at a bunch of people. It's like, it's not so much darn you for not voting. It's what could we have done to make sure that you voted?
Yeah.
And we did well in Pueblo. We won 53% of the vote. I think the last time it was a lot closer than that. But when I look at Pueblo and some other places, there were some people that should have voted that didn't vote, and that's disheartening. But that's on the candidate to try to get out there and inspire those people to come out to vote.
Do you think that was because of political fatigue? Because 30 text messages a day, 500 mailers a week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a couple reasons. One, people are sick and tired of politics. A, B, non-presidential years always have a little bit of have fewer people showing up. Being a very proud pro-business, pro-domestic energy Democrat, there were definitely probably some liberals who did stay home. They just wanted to, wait for a true Democrat to run. And, you can't please everybody, but I stick to my guns about who I am. As I've told people before, there's a lot of hard things about running, especially in a district so big. But the easiest thing for me to run on was what I believed as a father and a husband and as a small business owner, is exactly what I shared in the Democratic primary and exactly what I shared in the Republican in the general election in front of Republican organizations. And so I think people saw authenticity of where I was coming from, even coming from the mountains, even being from Aspen, Colorado. We worked very, very hard. One of the depressing things I ran into when I was at this new member orientation was, I was home for 5 or 6 days over the last 5 or 6 months because I was just on the road. Again, the district is half the size of Colorado, larger than the state of Mississippi, 27 counties. The vast majority of people I met never spent a single night away from their house.
Yes.
Running for Congress, especially the Democrats, because they are traditionally representing more dense urban areas. And some of them are like, maybe I shouldn't complain about having to drive 2 hours versus an hour and a half now to get out to my most far-flung flungs. And so I think I didn't realize, like, the 24,000 miles we did, a lot of them with my son Felix, was a pretty unique thing. And driving all over that state, just all over half the state, all the time, continuously, basically since February, was a fairly unique thing to happen. A lot of the people I met, in the evenings we would go out bipartisan and drink and hang out, but the vast majority of people I met also, their elections were over in the primary. Like, they've known since June that they were gonna be winners, so they could start to build their staff, they could start to work on their budget, they could start to kind of lobby their leaders and the Republicans and the Democrats about what they wanted to work on. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they're picking offices. I'm like, well, if we win, I'm going to be getting Bobert's office because there won't be any offices to switch. We'll be the last people chosen. But I just realized, I guess I didn't realize how unique our race was as far as just logistically of running around. And then I think about serving. And Scott, you've been there with Scott. It's like, you have 120 county commissioners. You have 27 sheriffs. Most people have like one sheriff to talk with and 5 or 7 county commissioners or 3. And I can only imagine trying to keep, 120 county commissioners pretty happy over half the state of Colorado.
Yeah, we'd always get flagged, or somebody would bring it up that our mileage reimbursement, because that's a easy way to, maybe fudge some numbers to get some extra money. It's like, your mileage is this much, and we're like, yeah, we're in the Colorado 3rd, and you'd hear them on the computer, the financial people, and they're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it was anyway. So came home on that, I left, and then I landed back in Colorado on Saturday afternoon, and on Sunday I took off with my family. We went on a week-long, which normally we don't do, but we went on a week-long Thanksgiving break, and I spent a lot of time with Felix. You guys had a chance to meet him, but I barely saw my wife, Katie, and her daughter, Quintessa, over those past 5 or 6 months. So we just chilled, and we got a lot of accolades for kind of how we handled the concession, and at the end of it, how so close. And, it's a little bit of a bummer that the bar is pretty low in some aspects of politics. I mean, I think I've heard Adam Kinzinger say with Liz Cheney, when they get a lot of accolades for being brave, and like, we're not that brave. There's just a lot of cowards around us. And I don't want to throw the entire U.S. Congress under the bus, but it's important to stand up and say what you believe in, and because I do think the voters more and more are realizing what people are saying and whether that person truly believes it or not.
I was thinking about, as you were describing this, the first time I sort of met you, you called me up. I was getting ready to be, getting ready to moderate the primary. There was a primary debate, and then you said, "Well, I'll be over." And we talked a little bit then, and then after that debate, and you said, we were all in the whole Action 22 team was in the room when I had you on the phone, and you said, well, like, what do we need? And I was like, first thing we tell everybody is you got to show up.
Yeah. And
we hung up and we talked to you for a second. We all kind of looked at each other. We're like, who is this guy? And because the last thing you said, well, I'll be in Pueblo. And we were like, okay. We're like, sure. Well, we get you'll be in Pueblo once or twice. You were in Pueblo. Yeah. How many times?
I got about 18 pounds of Pueblo food to show that I was in Pueblo a lot.
There you go.
From the barbecue tour to the brewery tour to the sloppers. I told everyone I might have to go, if I do this again, and we'll see about that. I'm going on a kale salad tour, and the campaign team did not like that idea, going on a kale salad tour and CD3. No, I mean, the food is great here, and I was here, I would say 3 times a month since February. Mm-hmm. Sometimes every week, sometimes at most 10 or 12 days away. It's an important community. Plus, it's also a fun community. A couple other gems. Spending time in Walsenburg was very fun. And Trinidad, I really like that town a lot. I've been to 50 or 60 or 70 different communities. I think Trinidad's a pretty cool place as well. We
like it too.
Yeah, and so not only is this kind of the hub of the voters for a couple of different reasons, it's a nice place to be. It was, it's 1,000 miles to do a loop from the mountains, up by I-70 back around from here through Alamosa. But I knew in the primary I had to get in front of people because I was very well aware that there was skepticism galore of a mountain town person, especially coming from Aspen, Colorado, especially being a moderate pro-business, pro-domestic energy person in the Democratic primary. And I will say, I own it. We earned the trust of a lot of people that were very skeptical that I could connect with a lot of people.
Well, it was interesting too. I think it was at the debate, the governor's debate, where you spoke ahead of that. You walked up and talked to the Republicans.
Yeah.
And when you walked away, they had nothing bad to say. It was like, I'm a Republican. I'm probably not going to vote for him. But there was no malice in what they said, where, as you saw with other people running, there was malice on both sides, angry at the candidate and don't talk to him. Yeah. But the reaction from the Republicans after speaking with them, it was like, I do like him. I respect him. It wasn't, he's an evil, what was it, Aspen rich man coming to get us, or something, liberal.
It's all fine, and it was that, and then the Club 20 debate. Unfortunately, we only had one live debate, and it was up at Club 20, and people were shocked that I think I was the first Democrat to show up there in a really long time, and I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't know he has an option to kind of blow off one of the most important organizations. When Action 22 or Club 20 invites you, you show up, or what are you doing? Yeah. And I was just kind of surprised, with due respect to those, the other Democratic people that have not shown up there. It's not like it's not a lion's den. You're just walking in and talking to people. And, People want leadership regardless of whatever the party's from, and they want someone to speak to them truthfully and honestly and with integrity and hear what they have to say. And, I have some faults, but I can show up and do all those kind of things, whether people agree with me. On that Friday when we offered the concession speech and told people don't send us money anymore, save it for your kids and your family, whatever. We got a lot of emails, and that was not the plan, but probably 80% of the emails came from Republicans out of the state said, I'll never vote for you, or I'm a Trumper, or I'm not a Trumper, but I appreciate you standing up and having the integrity to do that and believe in the elections and not ask for the money. That's never happens. And so I'm not trying to be a political martyr. I'm just speaking from my heart through the whole thing. And obviously we resonated with a lot of people.
So one of the things I think that surprised me the most, especially considering who your opponent was on this, is the pushback that you got from the Democrats. That was a little shocking to me.
Yeah, politics is an emotional conversation, without a doubt. And, when I was on my city council for 8 years, I kept on saying it. I didn't mean to be flippant, but I hate to bring facts to this emotional conversation. And I did that a little bit. My comments in the Democratic primary was, I know that you're not looking for a moderate, pragmatic, pro-business Democrat, especially one from the mountains, especially one from Aspen, Colorado, but I can build a coalition, and there's just not enough Democrats in the district to do so. And so I tried to just hammer away a bunch of facts in a very emotional conversation, and politics have gotten incredibly emotional over the past couple of years on all sides because of Trump and everything else. And obviously, Representative Bobart brings a lot of passion on either side of that conversation. And there were just some people that were saying, I'm not going to vote for him. I want to wait for a real Democrat or a true Democrat, or, and there's definitely some people that stayed home if a more traditional, longstanding Democrat would have come out there. But I try to be incredibly respectful during the whole process of the Democratic primary. Sol was, hometown girl Sol. She was the number one competition, if you will. The two of us accumulated about 90% of the votes in the primary. But I didn't attack her one iota. I thought her policies weren't resonating with a lot of the CD3 voters, but she has a great personal story, and I was very proud that she worked with us, not for us, on the campaign, and it was great to get to know her as well. But I just know that it's, in theory, people love these big tents, but at some time the emotional thing kicks in, and there are some people that I know they just couldn't vote for a middle-aged white guy or somebody from Aspen or someone who's pro-business, whatever it might be. But, you see this, they've been studying the Republican turnout in Georgia, and the Republican turnout was very high, but they just all didn't vote for the Republican at all times.
Yeah.
And so you start to see when you're on this extremist side, and I'm not an extremist in the grand scheme of things, but I'm outside the standard deviation when it comes to the Democratic Party, because I am definitely far center, and that's going to upset some people that are on the far left. And I appreciate that. As I try to tell them, you might be here, I'm here, we'll be lucky if we get this stuff done. But to try to get into those factual conversations in a very emotional environment is not always easy.
So do you, I know we hope this, but do you foresee both the Democrats and Republicans moving more towards the center? You kind of touched on a little bit at the beginning, but that's what we can hope for. But do you actually see that happening in the coming years?
Well, I'll comment on the Republican side outside of Colorado.
Yes.
And I'll comment about that because I think they're off their kilter. But for a long time, extremists on the left were losing and the extremists on the right were winning. And someone who has a little bit of an economic background in me, I say, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. The incentive until I believe this election was be an extremist on the right and you will end up winning all the way into your position. Listen, I think Donald Trump had a horrible election. I mean, he put Walker in there. He got Oz to get in there. He got some of these other governors in the Kerry Lakes of the world, and the Republican extremism lost across the board. And you're seeing it in the newspapers now on a national level about how quickly that can try to ditch Donald Trump. They want to get rid of him. So I wish they were getting rid of Donald Trump because of his ethical lapses. They're really getting rid of Donald Trump because he's a political liability now. Mm-hmm. And so I actually don't think Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. I could be proved wrong, and if he's not, he'll probably take the party down. Who knows what's going to happen? But it is a little scary to see that from what I'm reading in the newspapers, I don't have inside information, is that the post-mortem immediately on the Republican side is the reason they didn't do very well is because they didn't run extreme enough candidates. Does not seem the lesson that I would be taking away.
So that, I don't think Colorado, if you look at Colorado as an example, I wasn't terribly surprised by the outcomes eventually. In fact, I've been bragging lately because I called what happened with you, but I was wrong on a lot of other stuff. That being said, the margins in Colorado do not speak to that strategy, I don't think at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Pulse is a very strong, moderate governor candidate, and I don't think, with all due respect to his Republican opponent, I don't think she ran the best campaign, so I wasn't surprised that she lost by that much. I was surprised that Joe O'Dea lost as much as he did. I think he's a pretty well-respected guy, tried to run a pretty moderate campaign of who he was. Michael obviously has a nice brand. He does very, very well, but the Colorado is not, 15 points D. It just things got fleshed out pretty hard here, and even if you dig down into the state capital, it was even a bigger swing, I think. One of the concerns I have for the Democratic Party is listening to people in D.C. and watching television and reading newspapers, is there's a lot of excitement on the Democratic Party because of how well they did above expectations, which I think we all have to agree they did. The problem is that if they take away a lot of those Trumpism candidates, I'm not sure they would have won Pennsylvania, and they would have won Georgia, and they would have won Arizona. And I'm a little worried that there's a lack of appreciation, that it's not always how great your own policies are. It's sometimes you're given a gift of who you're running against.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting too. Just in Colorado alone, and even nationally. Actually more so in Colorado, you're going to see this interesting fight between the far left and the more moderate Democrats. That's where we're going to see a lot of gridlock. Yeah. They're going to be fighting themselves versus fighting the Republicans. And the governor's going to be in a really challenging spot because he's come out against some further left policies, just being a businessman and more, what do they say, like a libertarian streak in him. And so he's going to be in a challenging spot as well. Luckily, he doesn't have to run for governor again. But if he's running for another office, which is rumored out there, that could come back too and kind of haunt him in the future.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see if we're looking at Colorado as a preview of things to come. For our listeners, you may not know that Colorado right now, in the assembly, the House is veto-proof, and on the Senate side, they're one seat from being veto-proof, which means that even if the governor vetoes something, it goes back and will have enough votes to overturn the veto. So, because I've said that a couple times, and people are like, I don't know what that means. How can something be veto-proof? But that's where we're at on it. The other thing I found really interesting from the perspective of, so we watch the elections very closely, but from a different lens. We want to know how a person is going to serve or represent, and that really fleshes out what a person or how a person is going to be when you're in the heat of battle, right?
Yeah.
So I was surprised because this was an upset. Big time. I was really surprised by people who sort of inserted themselves and took credit for your success. We're saying, oh, it was because of this, it was because of that. And they weren't really asking you about that. So first of all, what did you think about that? And then secondly, would you credit this success?
So, yeah, I mean, 538, which is this insider's website that's turned into political sport these days. A lot more people know about it. I heard them say in their podcast that this race upset their model and more than any other race in the history of their model. And there's also another graph out there of expected versus actual, and we were the best performing candidate of 435 people. So, I think there's a couple buckets. One is, I've said this before, I think the current representative is a little bit of the gift that keeps on giving about some things. She is just not representing the job and she represents enough people that they vote for her, but there's a lot of frustration against the Democratic Party when you get to rural and working class America, which is 98% of our district. And so running against someone that was very extreme and didn't realize how electorally weak she was compared to some of the other brand name people allowed that to happen. But we worked incredibly hard. 24,000 miles, 27 counties, 18 pounds of sloppers. We worked hard. We had a really great team as well. And when people started seeing us doing well, all the ground game, yes, the Democratic Party, but we had a lot of help from Republicans and a lot of help from unaffiliated voters. And they started just to up their game of the door knocking. And so, yeah, I've heard there's some comments in the public, people here, and there's some comments elsewhere about people trying to take credit for how well we did. And some of them were the same people that were saying you should stay home and vote because this person's not a real Democrat. So I don't have a lot of time to try to square circles and everything else like that. People should speak what they believe in, and we're going to continue to stay on the hard road and do the good work. I think people saw, even those that didn't agree with everything, that I was a safe pair of hands and I was actually going to be a thoughtful person when I showed up in Congress and actually would do the grinding work that needs to get done. And I think people saw authenticity. As I said, that's the number one thing I'd recommend to anyone who wants to run. You better show up and say what you believe because people can see through it.
Yep, and they can pick out the inconsistencies a year down the road if you campaign on one thing, and people pay attention more. I think people pay attention more than ever, at least in my life. Yeah, I guess maybe the 80s, but I was a kid and didn't know what was going on. which, by the way, the last time the Colorado legislature was in a veto-proof and then one away from one on the other side, that was during the 80s. It was during Reagan. I think it was Governor Lamb, and it was the Republicans that controlled everything.
Yeah, who was telling us about that? Was it Kevin Grantham that was telling us about
Kevin,
that yesterday?
I knew it. I knew it was sometime around then. Yeah. But and surprisingly, they did put through some stuff that may or may not have been good for Colorado, but for the most part, they weren't as extreme as they're like, oh, we're going to turn into this Republican super state. They did some good things, and it was restrained, and that's what I'm hoping with the Democrat side. Because again, we're a nonpartisan organization. We don't pick sides on this. All we care about the effects of what happens up there, down here.
Well, and I always worry. I like the checks and balance system.
Yes.
I like there being some balance, some opposition. Yep. It's the Jedi in me, right? So I want to see that happen. I think that's how you're healthy. It puts forward a healthy stakeholder process and all of those things you have to report back. And when that's gone, I don't think it's ever healthy for a government like ours to do that. So I do get a little bit nervous, but thanks for making me feel better.
Yeah. Well, and look at it this way too. This could be an opportunity because again, the rural side, the rural life, I think they have been ignored by the Democratic Party, and this could be a chance for the Democrats to actually show some unity and come in and say, no, we do care about the issues that affect you and do some good work. Are they going to do that? We'll see. But again, if they don't pay attention, and I said it, it was up at Colorado Cooperation. It was, this quote unquote war on ag and the urban versus the rural. It's like, if you hurt the rural Colorado, rural Colorado pays for Colorado. It's the ag industry, ag and energy pays for Colorado. So you can't ostracize that. The more you impact that, the more you cut back on and regulate agriculture in negative ways or impact their operations, and you have farmers quit or are unable to farm, bottom line, that hurts business for Colorado. That hurts all of us.
And yet, so this was interesting for you during your race. Right, you went out there with your boots on, and you had the conversations. Yeah,
Nucla, Dove Creek, Fort Garland, La Junta, Dinosaur. I mean, there were a few towns that had more than 70. What was it? Kelowna. There's 23 people in Kelowna, Colorado. I spent a little bit of time there, but so it's just getting out there. The number one takeaway, the biggest surprise I had was left, right, or center, just this concern about this urban-rural divide. Yes, the Democratic Party is a lot more urban and the Republican is a lot more rural. But I think this theme of the great state of Denver, and you have 8 urban counties, and then you have 56 other counties kind of left to the wind, with all due respect to our friends up in Denver. I would just say that from the far left to the center to the far right, I heard a lot of that conversation just about how much outside those 8 counties people just feel left in the wind.
Yeah.
And I think what I heard last was of the 100 state legislatures, I think there's 35 senators and about 65 representatives in Colorado. I think fewer than 10 of them actually have any rural roots in their bones. And listen, I'm not saying I do. I grew up on an Indian reservation, everything else like that, but I've never really lived in a farming, ranching community. My great grandfather started a feed store, but when it comes like truly, authentically being from the land, ranching, ag, farming, oil and gas, it's fewer than 10% of the legislature, and I know it's 10%, more than 10% of the economy and 10% of the culture, and that divide or that imbalance is not helpful.
Yeah.
So as far as our economy goes, ag is the number 2.
Yep.
In Colorado.
What's number 1? I always forget.
Oil and gas.
Oil and gas. Oh, another rural
That's
industry.
Right. That's right.
No, and my other joke is, rightly, I mean, I was, even before I decided to run, I was not supportive of this reintroduction of the wolves. And that came up a lot. And I think one of the new rules that will not be in play this time is that basically if you live in a high rise in Denver, you should not be able to vote below Douglas County and west of Golden, Colorado. So I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Or just reintroduce the wolves in that high rise in Denver.
Yeah, or let the wolves go down in the 16th Street Mall.
Yeah.
So let's finish it with this. I always like a good story. There's going to be the stories or the experience that you'll keep, like something that you heard, you learned along the way, somebody that you talked to, somebody that really, whatever happens, that's the one that you're going to remember, that you're going to keep.
First of all, I did the vast majority of these 24,000 miles with my 16-year-old son who took a year off of high school. So that was obviously a really special occasion. We're trying to figure out how to kind of capture those moments for posterity, if you will. So just driving around and seeing him interact with, the same ranchers and farmers and people struggling I did, and see his hold his own and be treated with respect was really, really cool. That was one bucket. I remember meeting, I think it was the electrician in a local hotel in Northwest Colorado that was making 16 or 17 bucks an hour. He was in his young 60s. And 2 years before, he was making 61 bucks an hour out in the field in some type of energy field. And he wasn't so much blaming the Democrats or anyone else, but I think one of the reasons that the Democrats are in such trouble is when they don't realize when someone goes from making 115,000 bucks a year to 37,000 bucks a year, that's a huge monumental shift. And that gentleman doesn't need job training. He knows he can be an electrician in a hotel. He can be an electrician on the field. And so I think one of the messages I'm trying to bring back, whether it's to Denver or to the district or in D.C. when I've spent some time there, is just I think that's just a great example of someone who's just been left behind, and not just left behind, but also just been disrespected by a good chunk of the Democratic Party. And there's a reason why the Democratic Party has gone from winning 50% of the rural counties to fewer than 10% of the rural counties since 1996. And so those are some of my takeaways. But, the bakeries and Parachute, getting the melons and down in Fort Garland and running around. It's just a really, really beautiful district. It is. It's not always fun to drive, 9 hours from point to point, but we live in the most beautiful district in the country, and I stand by that no matter what. I had this conversation with this new gal from Hawaii, but from the mountains to the fields to the rolling hills to, that Highway 9 from here up to Buena Vista, going from Cortez into Ridgeway on Highway 145, I think it is. Mm-hmm. There's just some really, just whole Highway 50, 160, Crestone. There's just a lot of really great people. And I'll guarantee you the vast majority of people want the circus to stop.
Yeah, and when you're traveling those areas too, isn't it great how much the people, even if they don't agree with you politically, appreciate you being there and bring, like, this is our life here, this is what we grow here. Take some of this. This is what we do, and just how willing they are to share and help, and just grateful that you're there.
Yeah. No, it was good. We built up a lot of good friendships.
Well, you clearly fell in love with the CD3. I hope that some of that love is also felt by Congressman Boebert for her district. Can I tell you the thing that I'm going to keep?
Sure, go ahead.
So you and I had we all had a really great discussion on energy, and it's something I'm deeply concerned about. But the thing that I'm going to keep is, you said something that changed my perspective dramatically, and it was, look, in Colorado we produce the cleanest energy. We have the mechanism, and we're continuing to produce the cleanest there is. Why would we stop doing that and hand it off to somebody who would not hold themselves to that same standard? And where's the morals in that? That was a thing that just sort of, it put me on a different trajectory with regard to this energy and what the battle that we're going to get into. Colorado does it better. Let Colorado do it.
Yep. No, without a doubt, it's an important industry. As I said, when any president is not begging Saudi Arabia for help or Venezuela for help, we can have a different conversation about what we want the energy mix to look like. But as long as we need to go to foreign shores, especially some really, really bad foreign shores, I think we need to, I believe in the science, but I also believe in the math. And not enough people believe in the math. They just believe in the science about what needs to happen. The climate crisis is happening without a doubt. The sooner we move, the better. But we need a realistic check about how long it's going to take.
All right. With that, I got to do the disclaimer. Action 22 does not support or endorse candidates, even after an election season that's not quite finalized yet. But we offer any candidate running for office at any level a chance to come on and speak about why they're running and the issues that matter to them. The views and opinions expressed here on Making Action Happen do not reflect the views and opinions of Action 22, the organization, and or its board of directors and board or members. And I think we will be back soon.
We will be back soon. Chad Borthman, I know you're listening. I have not done a good job of checking in with you and that with the ag community, but I just wanted to tell you that we were so impressed with everything that you were doing with the annual meeting that you had, who you had there, and the way that whatever's going on, the ag community is persevering, and we're really proud to be associated with you on that. So that was a nice thing. Usually I give you a hard time, but I wanted to see if you actually were listening. So we'll go see you all next time on Making Action Happen.
Thanks.